Moses versus John Paul II: the health, longevity, and vitality of two spiritual leaders. This video will discuss the two different worldviews of two spiritual teachers and the beliefs of their respective flocks concerning God's dietary commandments found primarily in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. Moses, Deuteronomy 34, verse 10 through 11. There has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom Yahweh the Lord knew face to face, in all the signs and wonders which Yahweh the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt. Moses was one of the greatest figures and spiritual teachers in all of Scripture. His life was a testimony of obedience to God and of being the deliverer of his Hebrew people from Egyptian bondage. Genesis 6, verse 3. And Yahweh the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. After the great flood of Noah's time, Yahweh the Lord shortened man's lifespan to 120 years. 120 years is the maximum apportioned lifespan of modern man. Deuteronomy 34, verse 7. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. Numbers 33, verse 39. Aaron, Moses' brother, was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. Moses was a healthy, long-lived man of 120 years. Moses' brother Aaron lived to be 123 years old. Moses lived and obeyed God's commandments, including God's dietary commandments. Moses and his followers never ate pork, shellfish, or any other unclean creature. Psalm 105, verse 37. He also brought them out with silver and gold, and there was none feeble among his tribes. As a result of being obedient to God's dietary commands, there was not one feeble person, not one, among the 12 Hebrew tribes who departed Egypt in the Exodus. Imagine a whole nation, the elderly included, and not one person was feeble. John Paul II. Catholic Pope John Paul II was born on May 18, 1920, and died on April 2, 2005. John Paul II served as a Roman Catholic pontiff from October 16, 1978, until his death in 2005 at 84 years old. He was the second longest serving Catholic pope in history. Continuing on with the early teachings of the Roman Catholic Church, John Paul II lived in his personal diet and taught that God's dietary commandments were done away with. The Roman Catholic pontiff, John Paul II, suffered from Parkinson's disease and perhaps various other acquired illnesses before he died a helpless, feeble man. John Paul II must have believed that he could violate God's dietary commands with impunity. John Paul II frequently ate tripe, pork intestines, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The once avid skier and hiker was halting in speech, barely able to walk, and in constant pain from the effects of what medical experts believed was an advanced case of Parkinson's. Leading up to his death, John Paul II was attended around the clock by private male nurses who helped wash and dress him and gave him an occasional massage. Catholic Pope John Paul II died following a urinary tract infection that progressed into a bloodstream infection. He was 84 years old. John Paul II was feeble, could hardly walk or speak, was in constant pain in his last years on earth, and was dead at 84. Why? God's dietary commands apply to kings and peasants, to the rich and poor, to clergymen and their flock, to the Jew and to the Gentile. Those who apply God's dietary laws, whether through knowledge of them or not, reap health benefits from doing so, while those who do not apply God's dietary laws, whether they know them or not, are cursed with disease, feebleness, and premature death from not doing so. Catholic popes have no right or special privilege to discard God's dietary commands, nor teach others to do so. Catholic priests and other false teachers are the same as the priests in Ezekiel 22, verse 26. The dietary teachings of the Catholic, Protestant, and many mainstream Christian churches are in opposition to what Scripture instructs us concerning the human diet. John Paul II was like the scribes and Pharisees who Yeshua, Jesus, addressed in Matthew 23, verse 27. John Paul II was like a whitewashed tomb in white priestly garments and appeared beautiful outwardly, but inwardly he was full of a dead man's bones and all uncleanness caused by a lifetime of destroying his body through the consumption of unclean creatures, specifically swine. Doctors are fully aware, or most are, of the blood-destroying, disease-causing effects that consuming unclean creatures has on a human body over time. John Paul II was not above God's dietary commandments and suffered a horribly painful and premature death as a result of disobeying them. John Paul II often ate pork and other animal organs for breakfast. Near the end of his life, on doctor's orders, John Paul II stuck to a mostly vegetarian diet, avoiding breakfasts that once included prosciutto, pork, or roast beef, and meals of Polish favorites like tripe, pork and other animal organs and intestines. Catholic Pope John Paul II was the leader of over 1 billion Catholics, most of whom have been taught and believe that God's dietary commands have been done away with. There is much cancer, disease, illness, old age feebleness, and premature death among Catholics and Protestants who are fond of eating pork, fish without scales, and shellfish in violation of God's dietary commands listed in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. Many Catholics and Protestants, like John Paul II, do not obey God's dietary commands, but will follow their doctor's orders only after they get sick. There are two dietary paths one can follow. Believe in God's unchanging word, be set apart and separate, eat according to his dietary laws, and reap long-term health blessings as Moses and Aaron did. Or believe that God's dietary commands do not apply to you, be common, eat all manner of unclean and unhealthy creatures, and reap bodily curses, diseases, feebleness, and premature death, as John Paul II did.